In the British Museum, Room 7, there is a stone slab 9 feet tall carved from gypsum alabaster. It shows a figure with the body of a man and the head of an eagle, dressed in a fringed robe, holding a small bucket in one hand and a pine cone in the other. It has wings. It has talons. And for 160 years, the museum labeled it a winged genie. It is not a genie. The Assyrians who carved it called it an apkallu. What that word means and what it connects to is the reason you have heard of the Nephilim. The apkallu were 7 sages sent by the god Enki before the flood to teach humanity the arts of civilization. They taught writing, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, divination, metallurgy, law, temple building, lamentation, and exorcism. They were not human. They were not gods. They were something in between, dispatched from the freshwater abyss called the Apsu, and they served as advisors to the antediluvian kings. Their names survive on a cuneiform tablet, excavated from the temple of Anu at Uruk in 1959. The tablet is catalogued as W20,037. It dates to approximately 165 BCE, but it copies older material going back to the first millennium. It pairs each antediluvian king with his apkallu advisor. The first king, Ayalu, is paired with the first sage, Uanna. The 7th king, Enmeduranki of Sippar, is paired with the 7th sage, Utuabzu, who the text says ascended to heaven. The first sage, Uanna, has another name. In the Greek account of the Babylonian priest Berossus, writing around 280 BCE, Uanna becomes Oannes. Berossus describes him as a creature with the entire body of a fish, but under the head of the fish was another head, and under his fishtail there were feet like those of a man, and a human voice. He emerged from the Persian Gulf and spent each day among humans, teaching them letters, sciences, and arts of every kind. How to build cities and construct temples, how to compile laws, and the principles of geometry. When the sun set, he plunged back into the sea. Berossus's account survives only through later authors. Alexander Polyhistor quoted it. Eusebius of Caesarea preserved the quotation. George Syncellus copied Eusebius in the 9th century. The chain of transmission is fragile, but the content aligns precisely with the cuneiform record. Oannes is Uanna, is the first apkallu, and the Babylonian tradition says he is also the culture hero Adapa, the priest of Ea, at Eridu, who was summoned to heaven and declined the food of immortality. Wigerman classified the apkallu into 3 visual types based on Neo-Assyrian palace reliefs. The first type is human-headed, bearded, winged, wearing a horned tiara and a long fringed robe. These are the figures carved into the walls of Ashurnasirpal's palace at Nimrud, now scattered across the British Museum, the Metropolitan Museum, the Walters Art Museum, the Louvre, and a dozen other institutions. The second type is fish-cloaked, a human body covered by a carp skin, with the fish head worn over the man's head like a hood. These are the Oannes figures. The third type is eagle-headed, with a human body and the head of a bird of prey. All 3 types appear in the Bit Meseri ritual as protective figurines buried in foundations. That pairing matters, because the 7th patriarch in Genesis chapter 5 is Enoch, who walked with God and was not, for God took him. The parallel between Enmeduranki and Enoch was first established by W.G. Lambert in the Journal of Cuneiform Studies in 1967, and it has not been seriously challenged since. The Mesopotamian king who ascended to heaven became the biblical patriarch who ascended to heaven. The names changed. The structure did not. The 7 apkallu also appear in a Neo-Assyrian incantation series called Bit Meseri, meaning the protected house. The ritual text, edited by F.A.M. Wiggerman of the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam in 1992, prescribes that clay figurines of fish-cloaked and bird-headed apkallu be buried at specific locations inside a building. At the head of the sick person's bed, in the foundation, at the threshold, in front of the door, behind the throne. Each group of figurines is activated by an incantation that addresses them with a specific Akkadian phrase. Shiptu Atunu Salmanu Apkallu Masari. You are the statues of the apkallu, the watchers. The word is Masari. It means those who watch, those who guard. It is the same semantic field as the Aramaic word Irin, which is the word used in the Book of Enoch and in Daniel chapter 4 for the beings the Jewish tradition calls the Watchers. In 2010, an Estonian Assyriologist named Amar Annus, working at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago, published a paper in the Journal for the Study of the Pseudepigrapha, Volume 19, Number 4, pages 277 through 320. The title was On the Origin of Watchers, a comparative study of the antediluvian wisdom in Mesopotamian and Jewish traditions. The paper argued that the Watchers of the Book of Enoch and the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6 are not an independent Jewish invention. They are a deliberate inversion of the Mesopotamian apkallu tradition. In Mesopotamia, the 7 sages descend from the Apsu and bring civilization. In the Book of Enoch, 200 watchers descend from heaven and bring corruption. In Mesopotamia, the apkallu teach humanity writing, astronomy, divination, and metallurgy. These are gifts. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers teach humanity astrology, metallurgy of weapons, cosmetics, enchantments, and root-cutting. These are sins. In Mesopotamia, the apkallu serve the antediluvian kings as counselors. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers take human wives and produce giants who devour humanity. The Book of the Watchers describes the giants as 3,000 cubits tall in the Ethiopic text, 300 cubits in the Aramaic Qumran fragments. They consume everything humanity produces. When nothing remains, they turn on humans and devour them. Then they begin eating birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. Then they eat each other. Then they drink blood. The earth itself cries out an accusation against them. When the giants die in the flood, chapter 15 says evil spirits proceed from their bodies because they are born from men and from the holy watchers. These disembodied spirits become the demons that afflict humanity afterward. This is the origin of demonology in the Book of Enoch. Henrik Dronell of the Pontifical Biblical Institute argued in Dead Sea Discoveries in 2014 that the giants' behavior, the eating, the killing, the drinking of blood, follows patterns lifted directly from the Mesopotamian exorcistic text Utuku Lemnutu, the Evil Demons series. In Mesopotamia, the era of the apkallu ends with the flood, and Marduk banishes them to the Apyasu. In the Book of Enoch, God binds the Watchers under the earth for 70 generations and drowns their offspring. The list of teachings is nearly identical. The moral sign is reversed. What Babylon celebrated as divine wisdom, Jewish scribes rewrote as transgression that necessitated the destruction of the world. Annus's argument rests on a specific historical circumstance. The Jewish authors who composed the Book of Enoch lived in a world shaped by Babylonian intellectual culture. The Book of the Watchers, chapters 6 through 16 of 1st Enoch, was composed in Aramaic in the 3rd century before the Common Era. Fragments were found at Qumran, catalogued as 4Q201 and 4Q202, and published by J.T. Millick at Oxford in 1976. These Jewish scribes knew the Babylonian apkallu tradition. They encountered it directly because they lived in a civilization where Babylonian scholars traced their professional genealogy backward through the Uanna, the post-flood human sages, to the apkallu themselves. The Uruk list of kings and sages is precisely that genealogy. It was the professional self-conception of the Babylonian scribal elite. The Jewish response was to take that genealogy and rewrite it as a crime. The beings the Babylonians revered as the founders of their civilization became, in Jewish hands, fallen angels whose teachings corrupted the earth and triggered the flood. This is not speculation. The Book of Enoch names the teachings with a specificity that maps directly onto the Babylonian scholarly curriculum. Chapter 8, verse 1. Azazel taught men to make swords, and knives, and shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets, and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids. Barachiel taught astrology. Kokabel taught the constellations. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments. Arachiel taught the signs of the earth, metallurgy, astrology, divination, cosmetics, enchantments, lunar and solar observation. These are not random. They are the textbook specialisms of the Babylonian Baru and Ashipu priesthoods, the diviners and the exorcists. The Jewish authors were not imagining forbidden knowledge in the abstract. They were listing the professional credentials of the Babylonian scholarly class and declaring them illegitimate. There is a detail in the Qumran texts that makes this connection impossible to dismiss. Among the fragments of the Book of Giants, catalogued as 4Q530 through 4Q533 and published by Loren Stuckenbrook in 1997, the giants produced by the Watchers are given names. Two of those names are Gilgamesh and Humbaba, the hero of the most famous Babylonian epic, and the monster he kills in the cedar forest appear in a Jewish text as evil giants, offspring of the fallen Watchers. The Jewish authors were not working in a vacuum. They were rewriting Babylonian characters by name. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, is the compressed biblical version of this tradition. When the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, they took wives for themselves. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. 4 verses. The Hebrew word Nephilim appears only twice in the entire Bible. Here, and in Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, where the spies sent to Canaan report seeing the Nephilim and feeling like grasshoppers beside them. The Septuagint translates the word as gigantes, giants, which is where the Western tradition of the Nephilim as giants originates. The Hebrew root is naphal, to fall. The Nephilim are the fallen ones. The sons of God, in Hebrew Beni Ha-Elohim, are members of the divine council. The same phrase appears in Job chapter 1, verse 6, and Job chapter 38, verse 7, and Psalm 82, referring to divine beings in the assembly of God. The dominant scholarly reading, defended by Ronald Hendel, James Vanderkam, and the late Michael Heiser, is that the Bene Ha-Elohim of Genesis 6 are celestial beings who cross a boundary they were not meant to cross. Annus's contribution was to show that this boundary crossing is not a freestanding Hebrew myth. It is a rewriting of the Mesopotamian apkallu, whose own tradition already contained a dark side. The Epic of Era, a first millennium Akkadian poem attributed to Kabti Ilani Marduk, has Marduk himself asking, "Where are the 7 sages of the Apsu, the holy Puradu fish, who, like Ea, their lord, are perfect in lofty wisdom?" And then, answering his own question, "I made those sages go down to the Apsu, and I said they were not to come back up here again." Even in Mesopotamia, the apkallu were eventually confined. Even in their own tradition, they were sent away. The Bitmeseri ritual invokes them as protective figurines, but the Era epic treats them as beings who were removed from the world by divine command. In certain anti-witchcraft texts, witches address the apkallu of the Apsu as "my warlocks." The Jewish demonization of the apkallu did not require a total invention. It built on ambiguity that already existed inside Mesopotamian religion. The Sumerian king list, preserved most completely on the Weld Blundell prism in the Ashmolean Museum, catalog number AN1923.444, lists 8 antediluvian kings ruling for a combined 241,200 years before the flood swept over the land. Genesis chapter 5 lists 10 antediluvian patriarchs from Adam to Noah, spanning 1,656 years. The Babylonian priest Berossus, writing around 280 BCE, lists 10 antediluvian kings spanning 432,000 years. The structural correspondence between the 3 lists, 10 pre-flood rulers in both the biblical and Berossian traditions, and 8 in the Sumerian, was noted as early as the 6th century Christian writer Cosmas Indicopleustes, and has been a staple of comparative scholarship since William Hallow's work at Yale in the 1990s. The apkallu were civilization itself, pressed into clay and carved into stone and buried under thresholds to protect the living. The Watchers were the apkallu inverted, made monstrous, made responsible for the flood. The Nephilim were their children. And the question the Assyrian sculptor did not know he was asking when he carved that eagle-headed figure into the wall of Ashurnasirpal's throne room in 865 BCE is the same question the Jewish scribe answered 3 centuries later when he wrote the Book of the Watchers in a cave near the Dead Sea. What happens when beings who do not belong in the human world come down and teach us what we were not meant to know? The Babylonians said it was the beginning of civilization. The Jews said it was the reason God destroyed the world. The stone slab is still in room 7.